Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the B2B Rebellion. Today is a bit of a different episode. We're doing it. We're looking inwards this time, and we're we're using some of our own knowledge here based on what's been asked of us on LinkedIn. So we've been pushing out a lot of content recently around the success of our webinar series. So also this B2B Rebellion piece is spurred off the back of it. It actually came from a conversation that myself and my guest here, Johnny, spoke about. Like we did some brainstorming off the back of the webinar success and said, okay, well, how can we maybe do more similar content, like come up with some key takeaways to provide the audience, but like shorter and snappier than the webinars. And this is how this particular series was born. Now, the webinars themselves have been like really, really successful. So we've had close to 9,000 registrants since, I think it was March 17th, I think, is when we first launched the first invite to the first one. And we've spent just something like $1,200 across all of those. And the reason why like we've spent so little actually is because we only did it for a couple just to test it to see if it was worth doing it. And actually, you know, we were driving more organic attendance than anything else. But I think the reason why I wanted to have Johnny on today is Johnny's been really behind the scenes, making sure that this has been happening and making sure that we've been driving attendees. Sort of like the Wizard of Oz when it comes to webinars, you know, for Leadfeeder, you know. So, Johnny, give yourself a quick introduction, mate, and let people know what you do here at Leadfeeder, and then we can get into what you've been doing for the webinars.
Yeah, sure. So like I've been at Leadfeeder for 2 years now. Started off doing a bit of everything from like paid search to like some organic stuff. And the last sort of 6 months or 12 months, focusing a lot more on things like account-based marketing, lead generation. And as Andy mentioned, with the whole COVID-19 sort of thing, we pivoted very quickly to webinars, and that ties a lot in with the lead generation stuff. So I've been focusing a lot on that over the last 3 months. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's and to be honest with you, whatever you're doing there, Johnny, it's working, mate. Like so the magic that you've been working behind the scenes, it's some of the webinars I was surprised at how well they worked, you know. What do you think, like what has been your process behind the scenes? Like I've got a fair idea what it was, but why don't you tell everybody who's watching what's been your process? How have you made sure that things have been successful? Like what have you been doing? Like what's your typical cadence that you follow for setting one of these up?
Yeah, I think one thing would probably be that like not following like the typical rules. So for example, like I've read a few things where people sort of saying to set up a webinar 1 month before you do it, and now you have this like super long process and cycle to promote it. And like we've literally had a week each time. we were running sort of a webinar a week and just having a 1 week cycle of pushing it. You kind of mentioned we ran some ads, for example, paid ads to reach a new audience. Like they led signups at a good cost or registrants at a good cost. But what really worked for us was utilizing two things really. One, our own audience, and two, the audience of a speaker and a guest who has a good like range of influence. And then pretty much it's sort of like, as I said, you get the speaker lined up for a webinar in a week, you confirm the topic. I mean, you can speak a lot more about how you go about getting the speakers, but in terms of the topic, the content's super important. So understanding what our current customers and prospects, like what their problems are and like what content they're looking for. So we've kind of speak to customers about that. We even ran polls during webinars to figure out what their biggest problems are and how we should kind of position our content. Getting speakers that are experts in that and just letting them like share their expertise, super important. And then in terms of the actual promotion, getting as I said, getting the webinar page live a week before, sending an email and basically saying we've got a webinar in a week. We have a lead list of leads who have downloaded content for us previously, like ebooks. They've attended maybe previous webinars. They signed up to a subscription list. Then we also have an email list of our users of the Leadfeeder product, and that's kind of split into paying customers and trials and free subscriptions as well. Pushing to that audience works very well, and we can segment that as well. So we get really great engagement rates there. The other thing would be using in-app messaging. So if you have a software product, you probably have some kind of in-app support system. We use Intercom. Push our customers and as I said, like the free users via there has been really important. And again, we can do like really good segmentation there where we're focusing just on sort of like our most active users who've been online in the app in the last 30 days, and we're segmenting by job title and job function and stuff like that. So we're only giving them really relevant content, and sort of running that for like a week beforehand, and trying to match when we're running it with the times when our app is most active in terms of the most number of users. Works really well. And then third would be social. We kind of push stuff on our social channels, and we create graphics, and we create some text to share. Particularly LinkedIn works well, but what works really well is just giving that to our kind of the team at Leadfeeder, because the team at Leadfeeder actually have really engaged social audiences themselves and actually get way better engagement and reach than the Leadfeeder brand accounts get. So giving them content to share and saying like, here's 2 or 3 versions of some text, here's 2 or 3 graphics you can share, and it's getting them to push it to their social channels is worked very well for us, and it's probably more important than us sharing on our brand channels. So in terms of like our own channels, that's what's worked best for us. And then in addition to that, as I said, it's about like the speakers audience, right? So as I said, I mentioned already, finding speakers who have quite a big sort of LinkedIn audience already, or get tons of engagement on LinkedIn already, is a good indicator they create great content. So it's likely they're going to be really good at webinars. 2, they have a good reach. So again, if we can give them content to share on their LinkedIn profile, they're going to get a sort of a lot of shares, a lot of clicks, a lot of reach there, and that's going to bring in a new audience for us, which is really important. And then also, if they're maybe a software company that's similar to ours, giving them our email content and graphics so they can push out to their lists is the number one way for us to reach new audiences as well.
For sure. I did the one bit, a couple of bits there just around getting people internally to start sharing it. It's been like sort of a nice way as well to get aligned with the rest of the organization, with the marketing team, make people a little bit excited about what's happening and what's coming from marketing. Because what we were doing throughout the entire thing was saying, oh, look at this, like shit, like 600 people have signed up in the past day, which was blowing the things out of the water to what we did prior to COVID-19. It's like after the first session or the second session, we were like, remember that one with Aaron Ross, the one I think it was the second webinar that we got like nearly 2,000 registrations in like 4 days or something, and we just kept on like promoting that internally to the sales organization and to everybody else, and they were like, holy shit, this is unbelievable. And then people got really behind and got really excited and more energy, and
Yeah, and like the other really good thing about these, which we didn't mention, is like after we've created content, like giving it back to the sales teams there, especially outbound sales teams, and it's content they can then share with the prospects they're reaching out to, and that's also really great for them as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, like I think like the you mentioned one thing around like moving pretty quickly on these things. Ideally, like in an ideal world, I wouldn't like to be moving that quickly. I think you probably agree with me there, but it's actually been probably an advantage. Actually, it's added to it.
Definitely at the moment, because like particularly obviously with COVID-19, stuff's moving so quickly that being able to turn around a piece of content within a week is great. And if you're going and trying to create a piece of content like an ebook, it takes a lot of time to write and design and et cetera. Like the webinar, as I said, we can utilize content we have already, make a small slide deck and have a discussion. You can do that within a few days or a week. So you get to turn content around really quickly.
For sure. And just so people know, like when we're talking about creating new content, it would typically like, or when we're thinking about the next webinar, it would typically be like you and myself having a chat for like 20-25 minutes or something, brainstorming a couple of ideas. Like you do quite a lot of work, or we both do quite a lot of work with the sales organization. So like letting that influence us in terms of what topics could be of interest. And we both know that like sales topics are super, super topical at the moment. So we're just going to keep on focusing on sales topics. Like to touch on a point that you asked me about before about getting people on board to actually do it. It's a slog, It reminds me of being an SDR a little bit. Like there was at the start, it was easy enough because I had people in my network that I could tap into. But like that was like 3 months ago now. And we've been trying to run these things nearly every week. So there's only a certain amount of people I have in my network that I can tap into that can drive a crowd. So it's been like doing this like cold outreach to like sales celebrities, let's call it celebs, I don't know, influencers. And really like, getting them to add the value, but they also drive an audience. But look, that's it from my side, Johnny. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Not really. As I said, like I kind of feel like, particularly in the COVID-19 thing, a lot of people after a couple of weeks were saying like everyone's like webinared out and like stop doing them. Everyone's bored. But like I said, we were doing our 10th one the other week and the feedback was amazing. I think the lesson is just like, if you create that great content, like however you put that content out there in whatever form you put it, if it's really valuable and you're giving people like really tangible takeaways and actions that they can implement and improve like their job, like they're going to appreciate it. So just create that content, and webinars are like, as I said, compared to an ebook, such an easy way to get started in that kind of content.
For sure. Cheers, Johnny. I need to send you in the details of the one for next week now.
Cool. Well, keep an eye on the inbox.
All right, man. Take it easy, bud.